30 years ago, during the war against the demons, it was the efforts of the Mervinger family that led the anti-demonic forces to victory, but the cost was high. Most of the family was killed, leaving only 2 survivors, namely, 8-year-old Rick Mervinger and his sister. Soon, those who once followed the Mervingers turned their backs on the orphaned children. Witnessing such cruelty from a young age, Rick vowed to become a powerful mage one day. But life dealt him more lemons. Rick was diagnosed with a rare condition known as mana avascularity, which made it impossible for him to practice magic, turning him into a subject of ridicule. Despite endless efforts to cure his illness, nothing really worked. Then one day, it seemed that his prayers had finally been answered. He found a dragon, the only hope to cure his condition and restore the legacy of the Mervinger family. To his shock, the dragon was already dead. In its place, stood the shadow of a man with horns and a sinister smile looking at Rick. He thought he now had a new body to possess. Approaching, he offered Rick the chance to become one with him to destroy this world and create a new one together. Dark energy began to swirl around Rick's body, occupying his vessel. It was then that he realized this had been a test prepared by the Prince of Darkness all along. If he had known the consequences, Rick would never have set out in search of the dragon. However, even on the brink of despair, he promised himself that he would not be devoured so easily, and Rick received the news about his mana avascularity, along with the fact that the doctors had tried everything to cure it, but unfortunately found no solution. This meant he would not be able to use magic for the rest of his life. Later at Usden Academy, he calls his sister Rizi, who seems worried about his condition and asks what the doctor said. Rick knows there is no cure. He assures her that he can take care of himself, and that he will be fine soon. Still, Rizi cannot help but worry, and Rick, realizing this, makes up an excuse and ends the call. Anxious, he wonders how he will tell her that he might have to return home soon. After that, Rick heads to the results board to check the final results of the term. It turns out that Rick passed all the theoretical exams with flying colors, but once again he failed the practical magic exams. This is his 4th consecutive failure, which means he will be expelled. He studied every sheet to achieve the best grades. Not only that, he had intelligence and a natural instinct for detecting and interpreting mana, talents that any mage would dream of having. Still, no matter how incredible these talents were, his condition made it impossible to practice magic. One of Rick's professors suggested he become a teacher, but that would not help restore his family's glory. Rick's grandfather, Uzdo Mervinger, known as the Mage of the Stars, was a hero in the war against the demons. He built the very school that Rick now attends. Being expelled would be as humiliating as bringing disgrace to his family's name with his own hands. Then he overhears 2 freshmen gossiping about him and approaches to them. Rick threatens to report them to their teaching assistant, Chan. The 2 freshmen quickly back away. Later, Rick reads a book searching for a cure for his illness. Suddenly, he gets slapped as he turns around. He sees that Chan is furious with him for using his name to threaten people. Chan is from the prestigious Neresta family since the fall of the Mervingings. The Turium has been commanded by Rexcal, formed by the 6 main families of the Empire. One of them is the Neresta family. Despite all of this, Chan is Eric's only friend, the one who has always been by his side. While they are sitting together, Chan hands Eric a paper. It details the plan for the Diamond Dragon expedition. He suggests that Eric join the group, since the location of a new type of proto-dragon has been discovered. Upon hearing this, Elric grabs the paper instantly, unable to believe that the mystical beast, possibly the origin of magic, has been found. His excitement is so evident that Chan begins to boast about how he is an amazing friend. But all Elric can think about is that there must be a cure for his illness out there. However, this is not a personal project, so the discoveries would belong to the Dean. Suddenly, Elric slams the map on the table and starts laughing like a madman. Chan, a bit confused, watches as Elric points to the map, declaring that the lair is not where everyone thinks. Out loud, Elric points to the map and suggests that the lair is not there. Upon hearing this, Chan looks around and realizes that no one heard, so he advises Elric to be careful, as he doesn't want to get on the professor's bad side since they were involved in this. Still, that doesn't change the fact that Elric is right. Chan tells him to keep his mouth shut and act like a knight, considering the history of the Neresta family. Then, through his magic, Chan draws a circle around the map to investigate it further. Both see a fissure where 2 tectonic plates collide, and an insane amount of mana flows. Elric realizes that its value is around 100,000 years, and the criteria seem to resemble those of the dragon's lair. After that, Elric wonders about the 3 principles of the mana current, to which Chan responds after hesitating a bit. He says, from high to low, from wide to narrow, from hot to cold. If Elric searches using these rules, he will quickly find a fissure. But then Chan points to a place and tells Elric to keep in mind that there is an extremely hot underground water flow that prevents the accumulation of mana, making survival difficult for dragons. Chan's eyes fall on Mount Akron, which is spewing lava, and Elric realizes that the heated underground water from the mountain spreads throughout the continent. Coming back to reality, Chan, confused and frustrated, cannot believe that there is no cave since they already detected a wave of dragon magic in that area. Meanwhile, Elric, who smiles, says he never mentioned that there is no cave there, and instead points out that it is in the Karagu cave. Later, Chan goes to the dean's office but is hesitant about how he should mention this, as he could be expelled. But it could also be that what Elric said was true. Anyway, Chan hears some noise coming from the training room, and it is Elric trying to concentrate on his mana to regain his family's lost glory. Chan sees his friend struggling, and realizes that this may be the only chance for his illness to be cured. So, as a true friend, he decides to help him, and enters the dean's office. Upon hearing this, the dean sees it as a blow to his ego that his research team could be wrong. Chan tries to convince him otherwise, but the dean seems furious and says that Chan will pay the consequences, no matter what his origin is. The dean himself is a seven-circle mage, and begins to emit a large amount of mana, but before anything could happen, Elric forcefully opens the door. Elric bows to the dean and apologizes for entering like this. The dean gets straight to the point and asks if he convinced him. Chan says this, and Rick agrees with what the dean says, expressing gratitude for his insight but argues that it all relies on a hunch. Without any proof, Rick smiles and states that his opinion is based on common sense, so simple that even a child could understand. Meanwhile, Chan is silently crying, wondering why Rick is provoking the dean from the other side. The dean retorts, saying that Rick is nothing but a failed student who can't even concentrate mana. Even so, Rick remains serious as the dean states that there are people who are lucky, and then there are people who are chosen, useless and unaware of where they belong, pointing at Rick. But of course, being a professor, he cannot completely ignore Elric's opinion. So he suggests a bet. Elric asks for an explanation about the idea, and the dean explains that he will allow Elric to recruit the exploration group, and even if he needs more money to buy something, that budget will be granted. But there is a condition. If he fails, there is one thing the dean wants from him, and that is the only relic of his grandfather. Later, as the carriage moves forward, Chan loses his calm with Elric for agreeing to the dean's deal. Rick, however, seems completely unconcerned, continuing to read his book with a distant calm. Frustrated, Chan snatches the book from his hands and yells that, if they can't locate the lair, he will lose the family relic, an artifact passed down through generations. This relic is none other than the Great Magic Necklace, a relic the dean has had his eye on for years. Strangely, Rick continues to smile. That carefree smile only infuriates Chan more, because he too will be dragged into ruin if Rick fails. Still irritated, Chan demands to know what Rick plans to do next. Rick finally leans forward, and to Chan's surprise, reveals that he did not accept the dean's bet because he wants to stay at the academy. He then declares that if the dean wants the Mervinger family treasure, then he better be prepared to give up his position as dean. A bit anxious, Chan remembers that besides being labeled as the shame of the Mervinger family, Eric once earned another infamous title, the rabid dog of the Mervinger family. Eric suddenly displays a frightening smile, which makes Chan uneasy. 7 years ago, when they entered the academy and Rick was only 15, most of the other students were already practicing their mana. Due to his condition, Rick falls behind, leading to whispers and doubts. People question whether he is even a true Mervinger and often say that he is probably adopted. Chan feels pity for Elric, of course, but feels even more pity for those who provoke him, because Elric always ensures that they pay the price later. Elric is appointed to the disciplinary committee of the Uzdon Academy, and whenever asked about his justice, Rick casually states that he punishes his aggressors according to the law of the Empire. Eventually, he is suspended. The academy regulations state that all students are equal, but after that incident, no one dares to challenge him again. Returning to the present, Chan suddenly realizes what Rick is reading. It is a forbidden book, and it is Rick who is reading it in plain sight. Chan becomes furious and starts shouting, demanding to know what Rick's intentions are. Nervously, Rick admits that, if caught, he might very well be executed, but Chan insists on why he is reading the body fortification of the Tiger King. Rick innocently responds that he believes there might be a way to heal his condition in this book. After all, in ancient times, the Tiger King led the Therianthropes and invaded the Empire, his body fortification making him almost invincible. His condition in this book, after all, in ancient times, the Tiger King led the Therianthropes and invaded the Empire, His bodily fortification made him almost invincible. It took the full power of the Empire to repel the Therianthropes and drive them beyond the borders. A wall was erected to keep them away, and the Tiger King lost the ability to use his fortification. Zan interrupts. The scholars had not failed to restore it, but Rick calmly corrects him. The scholars indeed managed to restore it. Now, Rick's task is to find a way to apply this to his own body. Chamal may believe it, but in the end, he decides to trust Rick suddenly. The carriage alerts both Chan and Eric, who step out to see what is happening. In front of them stands Leben and his group. Chan positions himself in front of Eric, ready to defend him, but Leben quickly gives up, claiming that the dean sent them to offer help. At first, Rick finds the gesture suspiciously kind. He doesn't need help, certainly not from the dean. Chan leans towards him and whispers that some of Leben's group are hiding their true strength, a typical move from the greedy Dean Varu. But Rick is prepared. A little earlier, back at the academy, Varu noticed something that made his blood run cold. It was Rick who brought the Breath of War and the celestial armor with him. The Breath of Garena is a devastating item that contains sulfur always burning, capable of turning anything to ashes, and the celestial armor, a legendary relic, offers powerful protection against elemental magic and physical trauma. Varu loses his head. The idea of handing over 2 4-star items to the mad dog of the Merving family is pure madness. He cannot let anyone find out, but a thought occurs to him. What if Rick actually finds the hideout? Varu murmurs to himself. After all, Rick is a Merving to cover his tracks. Varu decides to discreetly dismiss several researchers. After all, how could a mere student discover something that trained scholars could not see? He pushes away his anxiety with a sinister smile. Varu calms himself, knowing that soon, thanks to Rick's silly little bet, the great necklace of sorcery will be in his possession. As soon as he obtains it, the position of minister will be within his reach. The thirst for power clearly burns in Varu's eyes. Rick may have won the bet, but that means nothing if he doesn't survive long enough to return. It is Rick who deciphers the ancient text, and with that done, Zan tracks the persistent human in the air, releasing a devastating wave of his own mana. Zan identifies the exact location of the hidden hideout. At that moment, everyone realizes that Rick was right all along. Without wasting a second, Rick turns to the team and shouts that they need to move quickly before the beam of light marking the location disappears. Upon hearing this, Chan wastes no time. He grabs Rick by the waist and moves at a staggering speed, leaving the rest of the group far behind. Sometime later, the others finally arrive at the marked location, only to be stunned by what they see, or rather, by what they do not see. There is nothing there, no cave, no lair, just open space. Dragons rarely settle in such exposed areas, increasing their confusion. Leben, seizing what he thinks is a golden opportunity to humiliate Rick, steps forward with a smile, but before he can say a word, Rick asks Chan to open a hole in the ground. Without hesitation, Shandis unleashes a massive explosion, digging a deep hole beneath them. To everyone's surprise, a hidden cave is revealed below, a dense wave of mana surging from the depths, taking everyone's breath away. Rick knows it is just a release of mana, and tells everyone to calm down as they prepare to descend. He leads the way, and the rest begin to follow. The cave is cold, even with the ground, using his magic to keep the group warm. The cold persists as they advance. It is Rick who suddenly raises his hand and orders them to stop. Something gave him chills, and it wasn't from the cold of the cave. In another, deeper part of the cave, a strange creature with a single glowing eye is chained and hidden from sight. It can't contain its excitement. It senses the presence of the newcomers. Back at the front of the group, Sean and Elric approach a stone door, imposing the true entrance to the dragon's cave. The team is anxious, but debates whether to open it by force or using magic. But Elric quickly interrupts them, warning that the door is protected by a dragon's enchantment. Touching it recklessly could trigger deadly consequences. Meanwhile, Liben steps away from the group and finds himself next to an ornate golden doorknob. Purely out of curiosity, he touches it, and Rick notices and shouts for him to stop. But it is too late. The entire gate begins to shake and thunder violently. A thunderous roar echoes through the cave, and it is Rick. In an instant realizes it is a trap to protect the group from the dangers of the cave. Sean raises a powerful magical shield for protection. He turns to Rick and urges him to decipher the next segment of the text before it is too late. The others are tense as no one wants to die in an isolated cave, but Elric remains focused. He tells everyone to stay calm. He sees the moment for what it is, not just a trap, but a test. The answer he believes is right there, hidden in plain sight. He just needs to trust himself as he always has. Now all he has to do is be quick, in deciphering the answer while he calls, has the protective barrier, and panic spreads around them. It is Rick who finishes deciphering the inscription. He turns to the group and urges them to remain calm, because if his calculations are correct, he can finally get them out of this nightmare. Holding tightly to the golden handle, it is Rick who casts a spell in desperate hope that the nightmare transforms into a daydream. Since everyone's life now depends on him, the gods must have been with him that day because somehow his tricks worked. The roar ceased and the terrible situation finally ended. Chan, completely exhausted and drenched in sweat, falls to the ground. Seeing the panting, Elric rushes to him, but Chan quickly assures that he is completely fine. Meanwhile, the rest of the group checks on each other, making sure everyone is okay even after going through a life-or-death situation. Chan admits that Elric's work was impressive, a compliment that instantly makes Elric feel a bit smug. Suddenly, without warning, a man is struck by a bolt of magic and falls to the ground. It is the second round inside the cave. Reacting quickly, Chan forms a barrier to protect everyone, shouting for Rick to work faster. It is Rick who turns only to realize something shocking. This is not just any spell work, this is the origin of magic itself. The legendary magic of the dragon's tongue. Urgently, Elric runs to the gate while Chan shouts that he can't hold on much longer in time. Elric shoots the celestial armor at the gate, surprising everyone. How did this supposed failure manage to get a 4-star item? Elric silently prays for it to work. And miraculously it works. The trap is broken. Panting, Elric sits down and realizes that his favorite robe has been completely destroyed. At that moment, the gate trembles and opens a bright light. Entering it is Rick calling the team, encouraging everyone to go inside. They encounter a breathtaking sight of treasures, more than any of them could have imagined. The team is in awe. Among the loot, Rick finds well-preserved scrolls that surprise him even more. One of them praises Rick's work and refers to him as captain. At that moment, Chan appears behind him, playfully grabs him and compliments his quick thinking. Rick explains that he has always excelled and was great in theory. He approached the situation as a test, outlining the structural formula of the spell before combining it with elemental magic. Suddenly, a strange realization hits Rick. Something about all this feels familiar, as if someone had told him exactly this before. Sean notices the distant look in Rick's eyes and asks about it, but Rick brushes it off. Chan then reassures him that no one would ever dare to disrespect him or his family again. Still, Chan admits that something seems a bit off but decides to ignore it for now. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the chamber, Label receives orders from a magical globe. He must eliminate Rick. Almost simultaneously, a figure grabs Rick, also calling him captain, and drags him to see a laboratory. Chan laughs and jokes that Rick is now a grown boy, being called captain and all that. Shortly after, Label approaches Chan and restrains him with a statement. There is a dragon's corpse hidden behind the treasure hills. Excited and curious, Chan assumes it will be Rick who comes later. At the back of the treasure room, they indeed find the corpse of an ancient dragon, appearing to be over 4,000 years old. Meanwhile, those who dragged Rick begin to beat him. Rick curses himself for letting his guard down. One of the bullies coldly tells him he has no choice but to eliminate him. All the others remain distracted, still slack-jawed at the treasure-filled lair. Back with Chan, he suddenly notices the dragon's body twitching, a strange sign. At the same moment, Rick tries to scream for help, but is muffled by the bullies. He is filled with regret, thinking about how hard he worked to get here, and how foolish he was to trust the wrong people. Just as the bully raises his magic to finish Rick, something strange happens. He hears Chan's voice echoing through the chamber for everyone to get out of the way. What Rick sees next is unbelievable. The dragon that was dead is now chasing Chan and Label, awakening and illuminating the entire chamber with a blinding glow. Rick is stunned. Problem after problem, he certainly didn't expect any of this. Rick stands in front of the dragon while the skeletal beast roars at him. Trembling, he gathers himself and decides to treat this as part of his test. A test where he faces the dragon and survives its fury. Suddenly, Rick notices something strange. The dragon is completely still. His thoughts race. Perhaps the dragon is waiting for its breath to recharge, or maybe it is using a massive amount of mana. Now that makes sense in his mind. The dragon is recharging to be able to use its breath. Several times in succession, Rick turns to the team and tells them to prepare for the impact. The whole team, along with Chan, forms a barrier, and thus the dragon releases its breath. The explosion is so powerful that cracks begin to form in the shield created by the entire team. Rick calculates that it takes 20 seconds to recharge each breath, and if they can survive this one, they will have a chance to fight and defeat the dragon. From the corner of his eye, he looks at the door and estimates they can reach it in 17 seconds, and close it in 3. But before anything happens, the shield cracks and shatters. It is time for the dragon to recharge its breath. It is Rick who shouts for the entire team to run. At that exact moment, everyone starts to run, and Rick thinks he will also be able to get past the dragon. But then out of nowhere, the legendary soldiers tasked with protecting the dragon stab him from behind. Chan sees this and shouts for Rick to defend himself. Rick knows he is the only one who can handle this. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierces his head, and everything starts to appear connected. His headache is so severe that he cannot hear anything. A soldier comes to attack, but it is Rick who quickly dodges. It is then that he realizes this is not an illusion. He knows exactly how the troops will move and attack. He begins to connect the dots, and realizes that following a trail of orbs will keep him safe, but he has to stay alert, because it could still be a trap, risking it. He shouts for everyone to follow him, and they run after Chan and Elric. While running, Elric and Chan dodge the attacks and protect the team. They are almost at the gates, but then Liban literally is the reason why. They invented painkillers for headaches, loses control, and falls to the ground. He begs Rick to save him. Rick knows the situation is completely complicated, but he cannot just leave him there to die. Of course, his morals do not allow Liban to rot alone there, so Rick grabs Liban's hand and pulls him with him. The soldiers are trapped inside, and even if the gate is open, they cannot get out. On the other hand, Sean is really angry with Elric for not prioritizing himself and putting himself at risk to save Liban nervously. Elric laughs and says it was not his fault. Meanwhile, the soldiers are trying to get out, but cannot. This leaves Rick deeply thoughtful. Someone must have damaged and manipulated the dragon's spell, and there is a good chance that someone got there before them. Suddenly Rick sees something, and cannot believe what he is seeing. Then the soldiers break through the barrier, and are now coming to attack them. Everyone tries to run, but all directions are blocked. Being the Lord knows everything. Elric goes back inside because he knows what to do. Chan thinks Elric has gone crazy and tries to stop him, but Elric smiles and says he will reach him soon. Then the door slams and closes behind him. Chan starts banging on the door, desperately trying to get Elric to open it, but it is no use, and Chan trembles at the thought of Elric being alone in there. 7 years after Elric's suspension period ended, Chan approached him to be friends, but Elric told him to go away, leaving Chan shocked every time. Chan tried to befriend Elric, simply told him to go away one day during a class. The whole class was being tested, and the teacher told them to run. Chan covered almost half the distance quickly, and realized he should have taken Elric with him. Suddenly Chan tripped and almost fell off a cliff. Struggling to hold on, the bullies in the class approached Chan, and instead of helping him, they started to intimidate him. Chan realized he could not hold on for much longer, but he also could not use magic, or he would fail the test, and could not show his face to his father. When all hope seemed lost, someone held him. It was Elric. He pulled Chan up and saved his life. Chan told him to go ahead and leave him there, but Elric remembered that he once asked to be friends. Chan was about to thank him, but Rick simply told him to grab some artifacts from his house as thanks, returning to the present. Chan is in a panic. He promises Rick to stay put while he brings his father and the elders of his family to save him. Rick appreciates the effort, but knows he will not die there. He runs towards the dragon because he knows exactly what he is about to find as soon as Rick gets what he was looking for. He is now armed, thinking to himself that taking care of oneself is what life is all about finally. He picks up one of the devices that was charged by the soldier's hospitality, and it is Rick who pulls the artifact that is usually activated by mana. But due to his condition, he cannot use it. Still, he releases it even as his eyes begin to bleed. He decides to use his life energy instead to activate it, convinced that all of this is part of the dragon's test. He knows that the dragon is the one who has the answers, and looks at the spear deeply embedded in the dragon's body. He believes that the spear contains the answers, and if his answer is wrong, he is doomed. Even if it is a 50-50 situation, he does not back down. Even with all the soldiers rushing toward him, with the proudest smile on his face, he recognizes that Mervins never retreat. As soon as he pulls the spear, everything begins to tremble, and the answer he expected turns out to be just a farce. He does not know what is coming. All he sees is a man with horns. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he knows that he is definitely doomed. The horned man looks at him, and it is Rick who feels chills running down his spine as the strange man begins to approach him. While the dragon roars in fury and horror, the battle begins between the dragon and the horned man, while it is Rick who remains still, just watching the scene unfold. The amount of mana released by the strange man is as powerful as that of an 8th circle sorcerer, or perhaps even stronger. It only takes a single blow for the horned man to end the dragon's life right there. It is Rick who cannot believe what he sees. It was that strange man who finished off the dragon, and now the man starts to approach him again, and looking at Elric, he thinks to himself that he has found a new body to possess, one that will allow him to escape the prison he has been confined to. For ages, the Horned Man tries to lure Elric to become one with him, promising to burn this world and build a new one. It is not a choice. It is more of an order. The Horned Man is none other than Mephistopheles, the legendary Prince of Darkness. 1,000 years ago, humans managed to confine him, but things have finally changed, and now he has found the perfect vessel to possess. The black energy begins to enter Elric's body. He thinks to himself that if he had known this was not a dragon test but rather a trap from the devil, he would never have come here. He is about to give up and fall to his knees while the Prince of Darkness laughs, watching how Sheena's magic is actually making Elric even stronger. On the other hand, Elric cannot stop feeling guilty. His whole family gave their lives to expel the demons during the war, and that sacrifice took everything from him and his sister. They were left alone in this cruel world. Even the person they trusted the most turned their back on the poor children and left them helpless. All that Rick ever wanted was to rid himself of his illness and bring glory back to his family's name, to make all the traitors regret the actions they took. Poor Rick is about to give up when suddenly he realizes that he hasn't even started. He has to fight back, because a true Mervin does not let himself be dragged into evil. Thus, with this determination, he begins to fight against evil with all his strength and will, hoping that his voice will reach his descendants someday in the future. He expels the spirit of the Prince of Darkness from his body, leaving even Mephistopheles shocked by the amount of power he felt coming from Elric. It is Rick Mervin who stands tall, mana radiating from him so much that for the first time, the Prince of Darkness feels fear in the presence of a human. It is Rick who raises his hand as he prepares to swallow the first chalice of evil, as was destined by fate. It is Rick raising his hand as he prepares to swallow the first chalice of evil, as destined by fate. Suddenly he finds himself in a place that looks nothing like the cave he was trapped in. He has no idea where he is and looks at his hands, trying to figure out where he could be. Elric's eyes fall on a man standing at the edge of a cliff, and he wonders who it could be. Although he seems strangely familiar, the man in the cloak turns and says that he was part of a group of scholars who wished to discover the limits of sorcery. In Elric's mind, he realizes that this is the voice that has been echoing constantly in his head. The man continues, and says that some of them wanted more power than they could control, a power so immense that they were willing to be absorbed by demons, and to do nothing but bring harm to the world. When they realized that what they were doing was wrong, they had to repent, so they formed a family. The sole purpose of this family was to eradicate evil from the world, but they could never truly stop evil from spreading, because evil will never leave the world. Then the man in the cloak moves his hands, and it is Elric who shouts for him to be careful. Suddenly, it is Elric who opens his eyes in a hospital and sees Chan looking out the window, crying. Chan is upset that of all times, it is Elric who had to wake up when he was crying and sobbing like a dramatic lady. Elric assures him that it is okay to cry. Chan says that he returned with the rescue team to save his idiot friend. Elric rubs his head and says he is the head of a distinguished family, and calling him an idiot is inappropriate. Chan should not call him stupid again, and tells him not to do anything stupid again. Then Chan tells him to get up for a moment. When Elric gets up, he realizes that he has grown taller. Chan tells him to look in the mirror. When Elric sees himself, he wonders what happened, and when he changed so drastically. With concern, Chan asks what happened in the cave, and what happened to the dragon. Jokingly, Elric looks at him and says he can't tell him at the moment. Chan feels offended. It is annoying to have a best friend who keeps secrets. After that, Elric asks Chan about the cave, and Chan tells him that his family is protecting it, keeping everyone out, since now it belongs to the discoverer of the cave. Elric is the law. Whoever discovers a dragon's cave becomes its rightful owner. Chan sighs and proudly says that if Elric knew what he had to face to keep the academy away from the lair. Elric smiles at Chan, knowing that he went as far as possible to save him. Suddenly, Elric realizes that Inveru would be greedy enough to try to claim the excavation rights for himself. Strangely, he smiles knowing that Inveru once tried to kill him. Chan realizes that Elric is planning something bad. Elric asks him for a favor, but Chan pretends not to hear. Still, Elric says he needs Chan to spread the word that he is injured, unconscious, and no matter how much noise Chan made, he still ended up hearing him. Chan does what Elric tells him to do. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, it is announced that Elric is unconscious and visitors are not allowed. All those interested in the excavation rights try to force their way in, but the Northwest family manages to close the hospital, leaving everyone waiting. On the other hand, the spokesperson for the Northwest family, Caldo Nis, enters Elric's room, but soon leaves. Upon exiting, Elric turns and says to someone when he will start talking, and stops staring at him. He calls this person Mephisto, and it is none other than the Dark Prince himself, who is seriously offended by being called that. Then Elric suggests another name, but the Prince of Darkness also dislikes this. It's Rick who holds his chest upon realizing that he always knew the dragon's heart is the source of absolute power. Of the proto-dragons, he wonders if it was at that moment that the dragon's heart entered him. But something seems different because he remembers that the Prince of Darkness tried to use his body as a vessel. So he turns to the Prince of Darkness in search of answers in the prehistoric era, when dominion was in the hands of the gods. There were 4 servants of the Lord of Darkness: Phoenix, the Prince of Ruin; Insano, the Prince of Insanity; Fornications, the Prince of Lust; and lastly, Peccatum Originale, the Prince of Original Sin. Known as Mephistopheles, he was the greatest Prince of Darkness, who is now pestering Elric just to be called by the right name. Returning to them, the Prince of Darkness is acting like an angry girlfriend, but Elric doesn't seem to care much. Elric wonders if all demons are this stupid, or if the Prince of Darkness just has hearing problems. The Prince of Darkness is angry for having waited 1,000 years just to have his mana stolen by a human. The same Prince of Darkness who once planned to have the entire world at his feet, but did not know what fate had in store for him. Shinaki, the King of Dragons, was the only one who stood in the way of the Prince of Darkness and planned to keep him buried with him for all eternity. Since then, the Prince of Darkness has done nothing but wait for a full 1,000 years, until one lucky day, Rick came to explore the lair. The very human he wanted to possess also passed all the tests imposed by him. He was inches away from getting what he wanted, but all his efforts were in vain, and all that remains now is just a glimpse of his dark powers, literally. He cannot understand what kind of magic Rick used that allowed him to absorb all his mana. Meanwhile, Rick just thinks that Mephistopheles is a drama queen. This irritates the Prince of Darkness, and he says that all Mervins are arrogant, while Rick lies down. He thinks about the monologue, hoping that his voices can reach his descendants someday in the near future. Suddenly, he thinks that the voice he had been hearing all along was his grandfather's. He remembers the first thing the voice told him: to swallow the first chalice of evil as was destined by fate, which could have meant absorbing the powers of a demon. He looks at the necklace in shock. This necklace must be the tool that allows him to consume the Prince of Darkness, and possibly many more demons. Rick looks at the Prince of Darkness sideways and wonders if he could absorb other demons like this, implying that there is a second and third chalice yet to come his way. This realization excites him, and the next thing he does is take the Prince of Darkness to the mountains, but he needs to check something before figuring out how to use the necklace, so he begins to meditate. Through his focus, he can hear and see everything. After that, he lights a large fire, which leaves the Prince of Darkness completely shocked, asking how a human could use dragon magic. This is something he wouldn't even expect from a Mervinger. On the other hand, he feels relieved, as his mana vascularity, the disease that limited him, is finally cured, and he is no longer the shame of the glorious family. Mervinger. Now he knows it is time to make all the traitors and those who looked down on him one day regret their choices. Outside the hospital, the press gathers in search of answers about Rick, but mainly about the excavation rights. One day, they will regret their choices outside the hospital. The press gathers in search of answers about Rick, but mainly about the excavation rights. However, Carlos steps back, saying that more details will be provided through the tour and that a written statement will be issued. Then Cal approaches Chan, trembling and begging him to never put him through this again. Again, Cal seems serious about his social anxiety issues, but Chan ignores him. Then Cal reminds Sean that if people find out he is dealing with things this way, the royal family and the Turium will be very angry with him. Sean assures him that Rick has a plan, and all he needs to do is have faith in him. Sometime later, Rick was in his fourth thought, that the higher the stakes, the greater the rewards. This alone is enough to stress Chan out, since Cal just informed him that Rick left alone, leaving only one note, saying that he would be back soon. Suddenly, Cal sees an envelope and gets nervous, realizing the gravity of the situation, and alerts Chan about it. Out of nowhere, the gate swings open forcefully, and in comes Chan's older sister, Tasha, confronting him for doing something behind her back. Tasha is the Phoenix Witch. Unsurprisingly, Chan looks stressed by her sudden entrance. The royal family, the Turium, and the fighter societies produced the 3 greatest geniuses of the contemporary era, known as the 3 Stars, or the Tristellar, who guide the Empire to glory. Tasha is one of the Tristellar. Tasha grabs Chan by the ear, asking why he didn't deliver her letter to Chan, and he nervously apologizes, saying he was really busy with his tasks. Chan wonders why she is really here, and she says she practices medicine, and heard that Rick got hurt so she came to help. Chan knows he will be in trouble if she enters that room, since Rick is not there, so he needs to make her leave now. But Tasha doesn't seem to care at all, and reminds Chan who she really is. She gets straight to the point. What happened to the excavation rights for the cave? Chan completely forgot that his sister has a passion for dragons, but he tells her that it's up to Rick to decide, not him. She understands and steps back, hoping Rick wakes up before leaving. She says that his older sister is going to beat him up for being a bad boy. Chan is scared enough to lose control and hopes Rick comes back soon. On the other hand, Cal admits that he is also about to faint. Meanwhile, the news is spreading everywhere that the young Merving is still unconscious, and people wonder what will happen to the rights of excavation. Eric sees the newspaper and knows that Chan is doing well with his work at the newspaper. There is a photo of Jin Varu, and Eric knows what is about to happen to him with a strange smile on his face. In Vex's office, Leben approaches him, calling him minister, but Varu reminds him that the elections haven't even started yet. Then Vex asks Leben how Elric is doing, and Leben says that, according to rumors, Elric is about to die. Pretentiously, Varu smiles and says he is very sorry to hear that. Leben suggests that maybe it would be safer for someone to take care of things, but Vex angrily interrupts him. Then Vex puts his cup down and says that there will be one less professor when the election ends, and he wonders who will take that place. Leben, seizing the opportunity, says he won't disappoint him. Later that night, it is Rick, who is outside a window using his inner eye that allows him to see the other side of reality. He searches for the hidden grains, in which he will inject the dragon heart mana. This way, he can cast magic without actually saying the words out loud. He casts the magic and takes his first step into the forest that pulls him to its beginning to take down Varu and let the world know that the glory of the Mervingers is back. Eric knows he needs to become incredibly powerful before the election happens. The Dark Prince mocks Eric after seeing him only jump higher, sneering that is all he can do with all the powers he stole from him. But it is Eric who takes this insult as motivation to become faster and stronger. When Eric closes his eyes, the Dark Prince becomes irritated, unable to accept such a gesture of disdain. For him, closing his eyes in his presence is a disrespect. Still, Eric does not care about what he says. He remembers something called enchantment in the magic of the dragon language. First, he forms the image of the magic in his mind. Then all he needs to do is speak for it to become reality. Seeing him execute this effortlessly, the Dark Prince cannot believe his eyes. It is Eric who begins to fly, even feeling anxious. He still finds it amazing and very powerful, so he tries again. The Dark Prince is perplexed to witness enchantment and dual summoning being executed, simultaneously at a beginner level, no less. He knows that the Mervingers have always been natural enemies of the terrifying demons in their potential, but no one has ever been as talented as Eric. Suddenly, a memory hits him. There was an exception, the first Mervinger, but the Dark Prince pushes that thought away. This only strengthens his determination. He must possess Eric soon. Before he becomes even stronger, he begins to plan exactly how to do this while keeping a close watch. Meanwhile, Eric reflects that although summoning is powerful, he is still too inexperienced to handle it proficiently. He needs a teacher, someone who fully understands dragon magic and can keep this secret. Surely he cannot trust anyone from the Varric Academy. Whoever it is must be as powerful as one of the lords of Excal. With no suitable candidates in mind, Eric almost gives up, but then he remembers the best teacher in the region, the Dark Prince Mephis. So Eric directly asks him if he would teach him. Mephis scoffs, asking why he should. After all, what would he gain from it? Eric makes a bold proposal. He will use alchemy to create a new body for Mephis, but only if Mephis trains him. Mephis tells him that he is rushing, but Eric reminds him that Mephis has little to gain if Eric does not become stronger. Acting like a sassy girlfriend, Mephis sighs, questioning why he should teach someone in weeks what took ages to master. Instead, he offers a deal. If Eric becomes one with him, he will teach him everything while secretly planning his own dark agenda to take Eric's body, gradually wearing down his soul. Eric, of course, finds him extremely annoying, but he knows he holds the best bargaining chip. In response to Mephis's melodramatic outburst, Eric silences him with a silly spell that transforms the Dark Prince into a kawaii version of himself. Enraged, Mephis becomes even more irritated, while Eric shrinks back at the sight, nearly vomiting his guts. Eric, upon seeing the rabbit ears on the Dark Prince, almost faints and vomits his insides as he cannot handle the embarrassing appearance. He hands him a diary and guides him to write everything he knows about dragon language magic. If the notes are useful to Eric, he promises to lift the curse. Later, Mephis, clearly irritated, says he has endured 1,000 years of imprisonment and that this little silly summoning cannot break him. Then Eric stands up to train a few hours later when the sun sets. The Prince of Darkness tells Rick that he will be kind and forgive him only if he begs on his knees, but the young Mivinger really doesn't seem to care. Days pass and Rick still hasn't asked for Meph's help, which leaves him quite bored, so Meph starts to write the basics of the dragon language magic, while Rick stares at him and calls him cute, which, as the Prince of Darkness, he considers an insult to his ego. He decides not to give in, so Rick transforms him into a dog in a suit, then he begins to read the fundamentals of magic, of the dragon language, but it's ancient knowledge that he has never read before. Gaining the knowledge, he transforms Meph back into a human. He asks for an explanation about the notes he made, and if he finds them sufficiently pleasant, Rick promises to let him speak as well. He continues, pointing out that each chapter should be longer than the previous one, so Meph has to write another chapter in order to speak. For the next 3 days, Rick asks to add a few more things to the chapters, which makes Meph even more irritated, but he chooses to wait because he has hidden some dark magic in those chapters, magic that will soon devour Elric's body and soul. A few days later, Rick realizes that just by learning the basics, he has become very strong. This confuses Meph, as nothing seems to be happening to Rick. Although he has clearly hidden dark magic in those chapters, Rick notices Meph's expressions and wonders why he looks so stressed. Meph tries to hide it, but Rick confronts him, asking if he really thought he was stupid enough to start training without observing things. Hearing this irritates Meph, as all his hard work writing the spells ends up being in vain. But now Rick wants to know more, to which Meph says he has nothing more to tell him except for his secret charms. Charms are the highest form of enchantment. Meph is sure that Rick wouldn't understand even if he told him, and Rick realizes that he is no longer lying. Then Meph says that magic is perfected on the battlefield, a saying that the Mivingers used to follow. Rick knows this is a phrase from his ancestors. They protected their lands from the invasion of demons. His father used to teach him about the family history that defended their lands, damaged by war. Although he couldn't speak much due to the aftermath of the war, Elric remembers that he was always reminiscing about the days when he fought battles with Elric's grandfather. Little Elric would ask his father if he could use the same magic his grandfather used to cast, and his father would always tell him that to become a great mage, he must first gather knowledge. As such, using strength without knowing the theory would lead to nothing, since his grandfather had also been the greatest scholar before becoming the strongest mage of all. Elric's father advised him to follow Raisa's guide, and his mother ordered him to finish reading his lesson by the end of the day. He acted rebelliously and said he wanted to play with his father instead. But Risa would often grab him by the ear to train him. They really had a small and happy family. Well, time flew by, and along with his father, his mother also fell ill. His father shared half of his life force with her to keep her alive. He tries to take the blame, but Elric's mother tells her husband that she loved sharing every moment with him and their children. But now Elric's father could no longer share his life force. Both were on their deathbed. The two little children are crying. Their mother told Raisa to take care of little Elric, and their father told Elric that it wasn't important to be a mage, but what truly brought him happiness was being their father. With that, both parents left the world, leaving the two alone in this selfish world. Returning to the present, Rick thinks that his father was wrong about not being a mage, because it is easy to be betrayed when one is weak and cannot protect oneself. Rick promises himself that he will become strong. The battlefield is where magic is perfected, and with that goal in mind, he knows that real-life practice is what he needs. Rick thinks about going to the haunted Red Forest. Selfish world returning to the present. Rick think that his father was wrong about not being a mage, because it is easy to be betrayed when one is weak. To protect oneself, Rick will become strong, he promises himself. The battlefield is where magic is perfected, and with this goal in mind, he knows that real-life practice is what he needs. Rick thinks about going to the haunted Red Forest, but the spectral monsters there would be too dangerous, so he considers the Goblin Cave, but it is very crowded and famous all of a sudden. He remembers that his father once told him that there are sanctuaries all over the continent where his ancestors used to live. He knows where to go now. So he tells Mephis that they are going to the land of ice and snow, the land of the snow people, the highlands, and so on. The next day, it is Rick who bathed in a lake. He needed to change his appearance so that no one would recognize him. Using his magic, he enchanted the water to give him a new haircut, change the color of his hair, and remove all his beard when he came out. It looked like he had stepped out of the cover of a Vogue magazine. Later, he went to the guild guide where a man let him in to meet his group of adventurers from the highlands of the Yetis. To Elric's surprise, the adventurers did not look like adventurers at all. There was a child, 4 herbal collectors, 3 monster hunters, and 5 people who were clearly hiding their identities. The child stepped forward and introduced himself with a radiant smile. He even provided a detailed explanation of his name. His name was Mingma, and he assured everyone that, if they followed his lead, everything would be fine. My son was already annoyed, but it was Rick who asked Mingma if he could find a teleportation crystal. Unfortunately, as Mingma explained, there were no teleportation crystals available. Only carrier pigeons and letters were used in their region. The chatty boy started to chatter again, but quickly remembered that they had to leave soon. He promised to continue his story during the journey. I saw that he was worried because he needed to hire his sister soon, but for now, he let Chan handle something when the journey began. Mingma immediately started chattering again as if he were paid for it. Soon they arrived at their destination, the Yeti Plateau. My son looked around and noticed that the place seemed familiar. It was where the Yetis lived. Rick was surprised to learn that Mephis had seen Yetis before and asked if they were the same as demons. Mephis replied that the Yetis did not fit into the same category as him, clearly irritated by the reference, but Rick had never realized that they were even related. Mephis then mentioned that the ancient king of the Yetis had a cruel fate, otherwise he could have been very blessed by the Lord of Darkness. He asked aloud if the tomb of the ancient king was still there. I laughed, curious, but Mephis added that if the tomb had remained, it would have probably been looted a long time ago. A realization hit young Mervinger. The tomb of the Yeti leader could be connected to his family, especially since the Yetis were linked to demons, and Rick remembered how his father once told him that the Mervinger sanctuaries were built by his ancestors to protect their legacy. He wanted Rick to visit one day the highlands of the Yetis to discover this legacy and pay respect to his ancestors. Back to the present, Rick began to wonder what this legacy could be, and looked at the necklace he wore, wondering if it contained any information. Meanwhile, Mingma spoke about a myth from his tribe, a story of a woman betrayed by her husband and left alone in the blizzard. She died, but not permanently. Mephis, growing increasingly irritated, shouted at Elric to cast a spell to silence the chatterbox. Elric, always observant, noticed something disturbing. There were no snow people around. Meanwhile, the Migma spoke about a myth from his tribe, a story of a woman betrayed by her husband and left alone in the blizzard. She died, but not permanently. Mephs, getting increasingly irritated, shouted at Elric to cast a spell to silence the chatterbox. Elric, always observant, noticed something disturbing. There were no snow people around. It was then that Mima announced they were about to enter the difficult part of the path after crossing a hill. The group settled down to rest and eat for a while. Elric looked at the other adventurers, and something about them caught his attention. They did not seem like ordinary travelers. They appeared to be knights in service of a noble family. He wondered what their true mission was, and if it had anything to do with him. Among them, a hooded figure seemed to be the leader. When the hood was removed, it revealed a young woman. Upon seeing her, some of the men began to harass her until Chen, one of the knights, stepped forward to defend her. Recognizing her noble status, the lady screamed and asked Chen to lower his sword, and he obeyed, although his anger was evident. Elric and Mephis watched the commotion in silence. Then, without warning, someone shouted for everyone to run. Panic set in, and people began looking around, wondering what was about to happen. There was a sudden and massive attack on the entire team. Everyone immediately began to defend themselves, while Chen shouted to prioritize the defense of the noble lady. The whole scene reminded Elric of a battle. Several Yetis had launched the attack, and Elric quickly formed a magical barrier to guide and protect everyone with his magic, but many were still being knocked down. Elric and Mephis exchanged a sideways glance naturally. Seeing the humans being destroyed brought a bit of joy to Mephis. Elric had heard that the snow people usually moved in groups of 10, but these numbers were much larger. Tane fought fiercely, determined to eliminate as many Yetis as he could. Meanwhile, Mephis couldn't stop himself with his constant comments, especially since it was Elric's first time practicing at maximum difficulty, wanting to focus. It was Elric who silenced Mephis with a spell still. It was Elric who found the experience thrilling. As a first training, he watched Chen use his night aura to decimate the Yetis. It was Elric who wished he could observe more, but he needed to join the fight, as the invasion of the snowmen represented a serious threat, and there was a high likelihood that more would follow if they attacked quickly enough. They could take the lead in the battle next. It was Elric who deactivated his disguise and summoned his armor. He reminded himself that he had saved this particular spell using memorization. The Yetis seemed unstoppable, although their presence left them somewhat confused. Elric wasn't sure if his attack spells would be effective against them, but he knew he needed to at least slow them down with that in mind. Elric began to kick and punch the monsters, casting several spells like Explode, Burn, and Pierce. His powerful attacks killed many of the Yetis, leaving only 2. The surviving Yetis tried to escape quietly, but Elric, always alert, skillfully cast his containment spell on them before they could escape and save their skins after killing all the Yetis. It was Elric who captured, but loved the experience. He left one of them alive, climbed onto its back after tying it up, and summoned Mephis. He called for him, not remembering that he had tied Mephis's mouth shut a while ago, and Mephis was quite upset about it. It was Elric who released the enchantment, and Mephis could speak again. Then it was Elric who asked Mephis to translate what the Yeti would say. Elric turned to the Yeti and made an offer. If he told Elric where his village was, he would let him live. Mephis translated what the Yeti asked to be untied and promised he would tell everything to Elric. Elric was a bit hesitant, but Mephis said that negotiating through conversation would be better in circumstances like this, so Elric snapped his fingers and released the Yeti's bindings. Mephis began to whisper something to him, and the Yeti smiled at Elric in a mischievous way. What had Mephis said to the Yeti? It was supposed to unite and destroy Elric. The Yeti suddenly moved to attack Elric, but his quick thinking saved him, and Elric tied the Yeti up again. Now both the Yeti and Mephis were afraid of Elric. As Elric had regained leadership, the Yeti decided to show the way. Elric politely reminded Mephis that, in the past, Mephis had killed the innocent snow people. Suddenly Elric stopped. He thought about how the powers of the ancient proto-dragon and Mephis were stored in his heart, and that he could only use 3% of his true potential. If he used all that power beyond his current limits, his body would explode, and he would die. He realized that fighting like this could kill him, but he didn't want to give up, as he wished to restore the honor of his family's name. Elric thought about the noble lady and wondered if she was okay. On the other hand, Chen and the other knights defended themselves, but the noble lady noticed that one of them was missing. Chen assured that he must have fled or hidden, but that didn't stop him from worrying. Back to the young Myringer, he arrived at the village of the Yetis, and asked to be taken to their leader. Upon hearing this, the Yetis made way for the leader, who approached Elric. Although Elric was a bit scared, he proceeded to ask his questions about his cloak. He was protecting himself. If things went wrong, he would have to take down the leader first. The leader of the Yetis noticed his green eyes and asked Elric his name. Elric introduced himself, and the Yeti began to lead him somewhere. They walked. While the Yeti told him that there used to be a legend in their tribe many years ago. There lived a powerful king who ruled the snowy mountains. There was a human who was the king's only friend. The human had bright green eyes and was known by the name of Mervinger. This shocked Elric, as his ancestor had been friends with the king of the snow people. Moreover, the Yeti said that the leaders of their tribe had been taking care of the human's house for generations. Elric wondered where the house was, and the Yeti pointed to the bottom of the cliffs, revealing its location. After focusing a bit, Elric realized that there really was a house down there. The leader said they went down there once a year when the winds were calm. Mephis started again with his comment that Elric needed a powerful spell to go down there, or he would die if he didn't use one, but Elric, knowing that he could also die because of the winds, still surprised Mephis and jumped off the cliff with a smile on his face. As Elric jumps, Mephis thinks he is a lunatic, but follows him, sure that Elric will die. Elric realizes that the winds are much stronger than he expected. His son seems to care about him and tells him to focus, or he will end up losing his life. So Elric concentrates and takes one step at a time, landing on the ground after jumping several times off the cliff, as if he were walking. When he reaches the ground, he sits down and tells Mephis, "This is how it works." Then Elric heads towards the house and sees that the door is locked with ancient magic. After thinking for a bit, Mephis suggests that he should try to insert a mana pattern in words. So Elric tries several words like Prince of Darkness, Mervinger, Demon Hunter, Yeti, etc., but none of them work. Elric wonders if there is something else that would work besides the mana pattern, something more like a key. He takes his necklace, points it at the door, and the door unlocks as if it were the key to the house. He looks inside the house, and it is huge and well preserved. There are many books. He picks up a book called Fundamental Principles of Witchcraft. He knows he will find a great fortune of knowledge here, while Mephis looks around. Knowing that this is the residence of the Winter Sage, it is Rick who hears this and appears asking what he is talking about. Mephis changes the subject. It is Rick who can't help but think that something must have happened to him, since he knows the king of the snow people and his ancestor. Then he looks at a book called The History of the Mervingers. It is Rick who opens the book and reads that destroying evil in their path is the only duty of his family. This was what he heard in his dream as well. He reads further that the mission TGE was assigned to his family by fate and is very possible to achieve if only they could absorb it correctly. Attacking evil repeatedly could bring a new wave to sorcery. The book also says to eat, swallow, and drink, which means to feast on evil until full and then transform it into something meaningful. Suddenly his collar begins to shine and crackle, and the collar tells him, "Young Mervinger, you have passed the test of the great collar of sorcery, and swallowed your first cup of wickedness, and now the next path will begin." Suddenly, it is Rick who opens his eyes in a strange place. He gets up and hears someone approaching. The man says he must be the young blood of the future who came to take on his duties. It is Rick who stands up, and the man introduces himself as Torhan Mervinger, the guide of the young Mervinger to the destiny of his family. He was one of the 5 main ancestors of the Mervinger family, and was the first to systematize the family's magic. It is Rick who asks him if he is the Winter Sage, and Torhan wonders how he knows this. It is Rick who explains that Mephisto told him this, and suddenly realizes that Mephisto is not with him. Torhan realizes that the first cup of evil he swallowed is the Prince of Darkness. Torhan seems proud that his descendants are doing better than he expected. Meanwhile, on Mephis's side, he is just relaxing alone in the Mervinger house. Elric quickly asks what Otto meant by the destiny he speaks of. Torhan smiles and keeps his hand on Elric's head, knowing he must have many questions about why they need to learn this way, instead of simply being taught. Then he responds that the family prepared something like a wagon wheel. Once it starts rolling, they can never stop. With that said, he releases a load of human essence. Then he continues, saying that they could not let this fall into the wrong hands, which is why they test their descendants even if it takes an eternity. But since Rick passed their test, he can decide whether to stop the wheel from spinning or let it roll. Rick still does not understand his family's will, but he decides to go along with it to restore his family's honor and succeed the will of his grandfather and ancestors, the true heroes of the Empire. This would also make him known as a great magician, which has been a lifelong dream of his. Torhan lets the magic ball slip from his hand, which explodes with a huge flame that clears a path. Upon hearing this, Rick becomes quite excited to see the ambition, so he takes him to the cold and freezing mountains. It is Rick who wonders where they are, and Torhan informs him that this is where he will be tested for his first mission. The weather makes Rick shiver, but he knows that if he gets through this, he will become extremely powerful, and the thought makes him smile, something that impresses Torhan greatly, seeing the ambition of a Mervinger. Then Torhan points to a place of darkness, and after focusing a bit, Rick sees a figure tied in the darkness, and wonders what that is. Torhan tells him that it is the Mountain King, the only man who has ever ruled these mountains. The Mountain King had a dream of bringing the Snow People back to being demons before they were expelled. His motivation consumed him, and this corrupt evil spirit is what he has become, as narrated by Otto Hahn. Furthermore, Otto Hahn tells Elric that the second chalice of evil he will swallow is the King of the Mountain. Upon hearing this, Rick almost wets his pants, not knowing how he will fight against him, but Hot-Han says he has to devour him. Moreover, he explains to Rick that from now on he must devour the demons and free them from their vital source. The seal is what Rick does not know what it is. Hot-Han explains that demons are born when dark, primitive emotions of the living, such as fear, depression, and resentment, gather around a self-consciousness, better known as an ego. The ego of a demon is what decides the nature, class, and identity of the demon, and the seal is the heart of the demon in which the ego is stored. Torhan points to Rick's arm. He says that in his arm is the core of Mephisto's identity. It is the seal of the Prince of Darkness. What Rick has to do is hunt them down and steal the root of their identity. Devouring a demon will make his powers become his. Then Otto Hahn begins to walk away, while Rick wonders how much stronger he will be if he can have that monstrous power for himself. The last thing Otto Hahn told him was that he is trying to devour the demon, not trying to defeat him. Then he flew towards the region, wondering what Otto Hahn meant by emphasizing the word devour. The King of the Mountain feels Mephisto's energy, and Mervingir, and now they need to prove their worth to him. The King of the Mountain orders his servants, the King's guards, to stop. Rick observes that there are so many of them, and that each one is more powerful than those he has faced so far, especially the King of the Mountain himself. He knows that if he could use a seal of original sin and the abilities of the Prince of Darkness, he could exterminate all of them, including the mountain. But the problem is that he does not know how to use it. Using his powers in the first test seems like a kind of cheating, so he uses explosion magic to create an explosion. What he did not expect was something sharp in front of his face, and at that moment, he looked quite frightened. Then Rick proceeds to use his spells, ignite and penetrate against all the snowmen, which proves to be a good strategy for defense. After that, Rick tells them that before being expelled, they were demons and therefore should understand what happens to those who have no power. Upon hearing this, the Snow People become furious and charge at him, determined to finish him off. But the young Mervinger has a resilient spirit, and knows that this challenge means nothing to him, as he can only grow stronger by overcoming it. He raises his hand and attacks them again, but ends up failing and hitting himself instead of the snow people, causing him to fall back. The guards are ready with their swords raised. While he thinks he might lose, but knows he cannot give up like this, in his first true difficulty, he tries to get up, although he doesn't know if his body can handle it. Suddenly, a dark energy surrounds him, catching the guards by surprise. It's Rick who looks at the guards, apparent anger on his face, and charges at them again. The energy emanating from him comes from the heart of a dragon, and he uses the same mana to fight against the guards. Furthermore, he casts his spells Bloom and Disperse, panting. After using the spells, he escapes from the guards after knocking one of them down, and it's Rick who falls to the ground, barely able to believe the difficulty of the situation, especially now that all the soldiers are coming back to life. He knows he needs to think quickly about what to do next, instead of letting himself get tired. Suddenly, something begins to attack him. He doesn't know exactly what it is, and tries to defend himself against it, but ends up being the seal. He thinks to himself that it's not as clear as the seal of original sin, but it's definitely something new. He's not sure what it is. But this provides a comforting feeling to your dragon heart, and prevents it from bursting. Perhaps that's why the demons called the seal by their own names. Moreover, he realizes that this is why they need to know the real names of the demons to harness their true power, just as Hot Honey taught him, although Rick wonders how he will discover their true names, since they won't reveal them if he just asks casually. Otto Hanley assured him that when the time comes, he will feel the name himself. As more soldiers approach him, Rick begins to channel mana into the palms of his hands. He thinks to himself that the true name of the Snow People is Cruelty. He can't explain why, but he just knows how to use the seal with his magic. He opens a path away from the snowmen, confident now that he knows their true name, Merciless. This definitely consumes a significant amount of mana. But with a smile on his face, Rick thinks to himself that it seems he used the power of the seal correctly, and now only a few enemies remain to be defeated. Suddenly, he falls to the ground, not knowing exactly what happened, as darkness spreads across his vision. Suddenly, it is Rick who opens his eyes, sweating in his grandfather's house while lying on the floor, unable to process what just happened. He hears Mephis watching him with a smile, and comments that it seems Rick has been through a lot. Elric doesn't believe that Mephis is with him again. Mephis explains that Elric's little necklace was shaking all the time, so he thought that Elric was having another devouring session, and it seems that Elric found it difficult to devour this time. Poor Elric is still sweating, and wonders if he hasn't been dead all this time. He must have fainted after using all his mana, and when he overdid it with the seal, he lost consciousness. Still, despite all this, he exceeds all his expectations. He thinks that if the incomplete seal of cruelty is already so powerful, he can't even imagine how strong the seal of original sin would be. However, he doesn't know how to use either of them. So, Mephis. He asks if that was the seal of cruelty, and if so, he is sure it was the Winter Sage who did that to him. Rick asks Mephis how to use the seal of original sin. Mephis realizes that he has already told Rick about proper names and everything else, but he also makes it clear that he will not reveal a single piece of information about it. No matter what kind of humiliation Rick puts him through, Mephis will never open his mouth. Without knowing exactly what happened, while darkness spreads across his vision, suddenly it's Rick who opens his eyes, sweating in his grandfather's house while lying on the floor, unable to process what just happened. He hears Mephis watching him with a smile and comments that it seems Rick has been through a lot. Elric doesn't believe Mephis is with him again. Mephis explains that Elric's little necklace was shaking the whole time, so he thought that Elric was having another devouring session, and it seems that Elric found it hard to devour this time. Poor Elric is still sweating, wondering if he hasn't been dead all this time. He must have fainted after using all his mana, and when he overdid it with the seal, he lost consciousness. Still, despite all this, he exceeds all his expectations. He thinks that if the incomplete seal of cruelty is already so powerful, he can't even imagine how strong the seal of original sin would be. However, he doesn't know how to use either of them. Mephis, then, asks if that was the seal of cruelty, and if so, he is sure it was the Wise of Winter, who did that to him. Rick asks Mephis how to use the seal of original sin. Mephis realizes that he has already told Rick about proper names and everything else, but also makes it clear that he will not reveal a single piece of information about it. No matter what kind of humiliation Rick puts him through, Mephis will never open his mouth.